Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to resurrect a video that I made a few weeks ago. So I have never done this before where I have just reposted an old video instead of making a new one. However, I am traveling for the majority of July, so I am taking my therapist's advice and just reposting a old video instead of like panicking and trying to film and edit and upload in advance a video, because I'm already doing that for a few weeks. So at least having one video that is relatively easy for me to put together will be very helpful for my stress. So essentially I decided to re-upload part of a video that I really liked, and it didn't do very well because I kind of tried a new format, which is a video essay slash recommendation video, and the beginning part of the video was a video essay, and I think a lot of people just weren't that interested in it. It's not really what my channel is known for, and so they didn't stick around for the actual book recommendation part of the video. And so I'm gonna post just the book recommendation part of this video this time. In this video, I am recommending books specifically to my male audience, or just men in general. At the time of filming this video, there was a lot of discourse going on about how men feel like the publishing industry isn't putting out books for them as much, and I kind of wanted to recommend them some books that are probably more pushed towards a female audience, but that I still thought that they, as maybe straight men, would still enjoy. I talk a lot about why I think they would benefit from these books and why they would enjoy them, and I honestly thought I did a pretty good job with this video. Was really proud of it. So I'm hoping that more people get access to these recommendations without taking out that very chatty first half of the video. So without further ado, to keep this video from having a very chatty first half again, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to past Natalie, and she is gonna give you some great recommendations. These recommendations are not just for the men. I really think that anyone and everyone would benefit from reading these books. I have 8 great books for you today. The first book I would like to talk today about is The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. I figured I would go ahead and ease you into this. John Boyne is a white man, and as far as I know, he might be straight. I have to admit, this is an author whose sexuality I do not know, but the character in this book is queer. So this is what I would consider like a contemporary historical story, because we start in 1945. We actually start by following this character's mother as she is kicked out of her town for getting pregnant out of wedlock. Is the man getting kicked out too? Obviously not. So this takes place in Ireland. It is a very Catholic country at this time, and we follow her as she moves to the city, and there our character is born in the middle of a very violent event. We then jump forward to 1952, and we start to follow our character as a young man as he is living with his adopted family, and he meets a young boy named Julian, and this whole entire book follows this young man's life all the way to 2015. Now, this is a young man who is queer in a time and place where queerness is not accepted. This is a man who spends a lot of his life very unhappy and very repressed. And he has a lot of feelings towards his friend that he feels that he should not have. And this really causes him to have a lot of distressing feelings towards himself. Now, the reason I think that this book is so important is because one, it really goes to show you that queerness is not something that you choose. This is a book that shows you how unhappy people can be when they find out they're queer, how desperate they are to hide that from the world around them. It shows a lot of the violence that was inflicted on the queer community. It shows like physical assault of people who are queer, and it also discusses the AIDS pandemic. I think understanding the trauma of a group that you are actively traumatizing or are uncomfortable with can really help you understand why they are the way that they are today and exactly what they are fighting against, which in this case is returning to a time that our character, I think his name was Cyril, was living in. This book also goes to show you how difficult it is for a man to live in a society where he needs to withhold a part of himself. We definitely live in a society where men are supposed to act a certain way, and so they might need to hide away certain parts of themselves. It doesn't always have to be queerness. It may be that they have interests that are deemed too feminine. It may be that they are more emotional than a man might be. It may be that they want to go into a career that has primarily women in it, and so has over time lost respect because it's seen as women's work, and just the unhappiness that comes from that. And it really goes to show you how much it benefits individuals and societies to allow people to be themselves. This also goes to show the harm that hate creates and does towards individuals and society as a whole. This is definitely a very heartbreaking story. The story also shows that things like homophobia can be very harmful to even the straight community. The AIDS pandemic didn't just affect queer people. There were straight people who were getting AIDS, and there was a terrible stigma around it. Even if they did not perform any sort of sexual acts with the same sex partner, they may still be rejected by their family. There was very little medical assistance or any sort of studies that were going to improving the care that was given to these AIDS patients, and straight people were getting punished as society deemed this as God's punishment of the homosexual. So it really goes to show the harm that happens to straight people, also harm towards women, because gay men would go into loveless marriages with them because that was just what would happen. So I think that this book does a lot to show this one man's life and the harm that comes from homophobia and just a society that expects people, specifically men, to repress a certain part of themselves. So this is a great read. I highly suggest it. It was one of my favorite books of the year, and I definitely gave it 5 stars. Up next, I'm going to go ahead and recommend a book that was written by a woman, and this is also a book that has some queerness in it. You've probably heard about it, and that is going to be A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. And this book, we are following Constanta, so your main character is going to be a woman, and she is the first bride of Dracula. Her village had been slaughtered, and she was in the process of dying when he approached her and saved her and made her his first bride. And over the years, we followed them all throughout the European countries as they live their life as vampires, and eventually he takes on another wife as well as a husband. This book is written in an epistolary format. Our character is explaining to her love, Dracula, why she had to kill him. And this book deals very heavily with psychological, emotional, and eventually physical abuse within romantic relationships. And I think that this book is very important for everyone to read because everyone experiences or is at risk for experiencing domestic violence. When it comes to domestic violence, we often focus on what is occurring to women just because they are more likely to be victims of it, but men are also victims of domestic violence, and we see this in The Third Bride, the young man that Dracula marries and brings into their family. And I think it's very important for men to read this book and have an understanding of what abuse can look like. And this is important for multiple reasons. On the one hand, it allows you to realize if you're displaying some of this behavior. If you find yourself relating to Dracula, to the villain, it might be a good idea to go ahead and step back and reevaluate how you treat your romantic partners. On the other hand, women are often taught what abuse looks like and almost to expect it. And so we are usually fairly familiar with what it looks like, but men don't often experience those discussions growing up as much as we do. And so it's really important for them to go ahead and learn the signs that they are in an abusive relationship so that they can realize it and get out. This book, I think, does a great job of really explaining that many people fall for abusers, okay? It is not a bad reflection on you. You should not be ashamed to wake up one day and realize that your partner is hurting you. In this book, we are following 3 very different characters that are all the victims of the same man. Constanta is, I would say, she is definitely someone who grew up very poor, very uneducated. She was saved by Dracula. He is everything that she has. She is the prime example of what a victim of abuse would look like, because an abuser would see her as easy prey. Then we have, I want to say her name was Magdalena. Yes. Then we have Magdalena, the second bride, and she's a highborn lady. She's incredibly connected, incredibly intelligent. She's very confident, but she falls for the same man and becomes his victim just as much as Constanta, and you can very much see her shrink under his hand. And then we have, I want to say his name is potentially Alexei, sorry. Then we have Alexei, who is the final bride and the one man, and he's very young. He is full of life. He's once again from a life of poverty, but he has a lot of spirit, and he is someone who brings a lot of joy into the world, and he just seems like this kind of free spirit that would never let himself get chained to this man, but he did. And so I think it does a good job of showing you that a good manipulator can really capture anyone in his web, and it doesn't reflect badly on you, and it shows that there are power in each of these individuals to get out of that situation, and hopefully it empowers some people reading this book to do the same. So I really love this book. The writing is beautiful, and I really think that when it comes to abuse, that a lot of men can also benefit from this. Up next, I would like to go for a very queer story. So just a reminder, reading queer books won't make you gay. And if it does, you were gay to begin with. So I would like to go ahead and recommend The Lightning Struck Heart by TJ Klune. TJ Klune has become very popular with his more traditionally published stories like The House at the Edge of the Cerulean Sea. I can't remember the title. I read it, but it wasn't my favorite. I like his older stuff better. But essentially, this is the first book in a series in which we are following Sam. and he's a wizard, and he used to live in the slums, and one day he lashed out to some bullies and turned them to stone, and he was then brought to the palace to become the apprentice of the current magician, and then to become the wizard of the prince who would one day become king. And this wizard is in love with a knight that unfortunately is dating the prince, a prince who treats him like crap. Fortunately, that prince ends up getting kidnapped by a dragon, which is great because now Sam the wizard gets to go on a quest with the man he loves, as well as his two best friends, a hornless gay unicorn and a half giant named Tiggy. Now, why do I think men would like this book? One, it's got, your classic fantasy little quest trail, but it is chock full of humor, and specifically a slightly dirtier humor. And I just feel like men do like humor revolving around sex. Not all men, but it seems to be pretty common if you watch anything or read anything that men are drawn to. So I think that this is the queer version of the sexual, slightly inappropriate humor that you would find in some of men's works. But this story, I think, on top of just the dirty humor that men enjoy, also throughout the series has a lot of like classic fantasy elements. We have prophecies, and we have evil being reborn, and we have dragons, and we have wizards and princes and knights, and it just has all of that in it, which I think a lot of men say they enjoy in their fantasy novels, but it's just all super queer. So I think that this book will have a lot of elements in it that men would really enjoy, and obviously reading books about queer characters just living the same lives that your straight characters would live really helps to normalize the fact that queer people exist. And that's really what a lot of books are here to help you do, because even me personally, if I think about people that I interact with like physically, not on the internet, I don't interact with a ton of queer people because I don't interact with a lot of people like period. And so for me, books are really important to learn about other people's experiences and just to see them and to be like, yeah, this is normal. Nothing in this book is really normal, but you know what I mean. I also think that Sam is a great relatable character. He really uses humor to kind of overcome his discomfort or any insecurities that he may be feeling. He is someone who thinks he is suffering from unreciprocated love, and I think that is something that all humans can relate to at some point in their life. So he is definitely a relatable character. He is someone who loves his friends, his family. He is someone who looks up to his mentor. He's just someone who has a lot of personal growth. This is definitely an adult book. Like I mentioned, with the humor, it's a little bit dirtier, but I definitely think that someone in their early 20s would really benefit from reading from the point of view of a young man who is in an apprentice situation and who has all these things being thrown at him and is just trying to keep his head above water, because we've all been there, done that, and did not enjoy it. So this is another book that I highly recommend that those straight white men check out. Now, reading is not just for adults. We all know that, hopefully. So I do have a middle grade book here, because unfortunately even young boys are moving away from reading because their friends tease them for it. First of all, if you're teasing someone for reading, stop it. Just stop it, okay? I would like to go ahead and recommend a Case and Callender book. I think Case and Callender is a great author. I've read a lot of their work and will continue to work what they publish, but I would probably say that King and the Dragonflies is my favorite book that I have read by them. So Kaysen, as far as I know, is non-binary, and they are also African American, so we got quite a bit of representation here in this author. This, like I said, is a middle grade story. In this book, we are following a young man whose brother has unfortunately passed away. It was also his older brother, so this was obviously someone that he looked up to, and it is a huge loss for him to lose this important person. And he stumbles across another young boy who he used to be friends with. He distanced himself from this boy after he found out that this boy was queer. Now, this young boy seems to be on the run from his family and is looking to Kaysen to help him. And Kaysen is kind of struggling with how drawn he feels to this boy, how conflicted he is feeling about his own sexuality. He struggles a lot with, what would my parents think? What would my community think? They live in Louisiana. Yes, a small town in Louisiana, not the most accepting. He's worried about what his friends would think. He's also wondering, like, what would his brother have thought if he knew that he has these complicated feelings for this boy. So this is very much a queer awakening story, and it's kind of tied very heavily in with grief and honestly fear of becoming someone new, and specifically someone that isn't accepted by the community around you. I think the story is very important, especially for young people who may live in smaller, more conservative communities. Yes, it would be very dangerous for them to read this book, but it would be nice if it was made available to them. This is something that a lot of people in this country are experiencing. A lot of young men are repressing their queer feelings because of fear of not being accepted and of being hurt, of being physically assaulted because of their sexuality, and of course being rejected by your family. So I think this is a book that a lot of men could really benefit from, even if they are straight, because it gives you this understanding of how much fear you can inflict on another individual just by your beliefs. A lot of times people might say, like, yeah, I don't like queer people, but it's not like I would ever like hurt them or anything. But just knowing that someone dislikes you and thinks that you're unnatural is still a very scary thought, especially when they think that those opinions of yours would take away your love for them. So I think that this is such a beautifully written story about a young man who was kind of coming into his own and kind of starting to realize that maybe in order to really be happy, he might have to be willing to leave things behind. And I think that also is something that people need to learn, that people who are queer are willing to leave you behind, and that will hurt you. So I think this book will go ahead and just educate you a lot on queer youth and their experience. And obviously there is also a race aspect to this story, since we are following a young Black man, and as a white straight man you should always be trying to learn about the experiences of young Black people, because it does differ from your experience. As this video gets longer, I just want to say that I am filming this on my lunch break, so I have a limited amount of time. It is definitely possible that I end up having to cut this video video and then come back later. So if there's any changes in angles or lighting, that is why. But the next book I would like to talk about is going to be Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. This is an author that started to make it big when he wrote Camp Damascus, which I also think is a great book, but I'm gonna go ahead and recommend this book to you guys. This book deals heavily with AI and algorithms as well as Hollywood and its hesitation to really step forward and have solid queer characters. A lot of times people will complain about how queer and woke media is nowadays, but I don't know. For me, either there's just a normal amount or there isn't enough. I never feel like there's too much queerness, but again, I think that whole "if you've always been the oppressor, then equality feels like oppression" quote is kind of coming into play here, where a lot of straight and especially white people are so used to seeing just themselves again and again on the screen that anytime there is any other sort of character, that they just feel like, oh, they're taking away a spot from a white character. But that's not what's happening. So I think that a lot of white men would really enjoy this book. We are once again following a queer character. This author, as far as I know, is queer. He seems to have always written queer literature and had queer characters. In his story, we are specifically following a character who is producing a show that has had 2 female leads that he has been clearly building up to them having a romantic relationship. And he gets approached and told that he either needs to kill one or both of the characters, or he needs to make them straight. And our character does not want to do that. And as he continues to refuse to do what the executives want him to do, he finds himself starting to be haunted by characters from his past horror films that he has created. So this is what I would consider a sci-fi horror story. I know a lot of men do enjoy the horror genre. They enjoy sci-fi. I would say this is relatively light on both. Some people were genuinely scared by this book. I personally wasn't that much. I, for the most part, was mostly frightened by the back flashes that we experienced in this story. We have the present day plot, which I just explained, but we also have flashes back to our character's life as a young, repressed queer kid and how certain events in his childhood inspired his horror films. And there are some very scary things that happened in his youth, and they are very, in a way, I don't want to say subtle, but it's not like he was like, oh yeah, a serial killer broke in and killed everyone around me and I was the sole survivor. It was more along the lines of someone found out that I had Googled gay pornography and they used that to blackmail me because I was so scared about anyone finding out. So it's more a subtleness, but it is highly effective. So I think this goes once again to show you the fear that a lot of queer kids especially have, and hopefully increase your empathy for them. And it also kind of shows how it can negatively impact these queer kids even in the present. So this character, he is technically Hollywood out, meaning that he is queer out in Hollywood. However, when he goes back home, he goes back into the closet, and you can just tell how it impacts him negatively, mentally, to have to do that. On top of that, I think that this book has a lot of things in it that you could benefit from, especially with its discussions of algorithms and the negative impact that those algorithms have on society. You can just see the downward spiral that these algorithms of what do people like, what do people want to see can be. I mean, we hear a lot about algorithms taking young men down these very misogynistic, harmful wormholes to people like Andrew Tate. And that is unfortunately just the way that the algorithms are designed. So this book definitely is a little bit of a warning about, hey, we shouldn't rely too much on algorithms because there can be very negative consequences to that. And we have definitely seen that in our society. So I think plot-wise, this book could be very interesting because it's got the horror elements, it's got the sci-fi elements. But on top of that, I also think that the social commentary about Hollywood, queers within Hollywood, the use of algorithms, and even AI, and of course, just increasing empathy for queer people and the challenges that they face in adulthood and in childhood, and also within their professions, especially when those professions take them into the spotlight. Up next, I actually want to go ahead and recommend a contemporary romance. So we don't see a lot of romances that are written for men nowadays, but I think that even romances written by women can be really great for men to read as well. So I have two here. I have one contemporary and one fantasy romance that I would like to discuss with you. So the first one is going to go ahead and be 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This book is written by a Black woman. It is a multi-POV book, so you get the point of view of the woman as well as the man in the story. So in this book, we're following two adults who are authors, and one of them is very successful in the romance paranormal genre, but she is looking to kind of move more into the literary fiction, kind of something she considers a little bit more serious. Now that she's getting a little bit older, she kind of feels like she's staying within this genre for the financial security of it, and she's kind of starting to get ready to take a little bit more risks. She is also a single mother. The father is in the picture, but he kind of lives far away, so their daughter spends time with him, but for the most part she is raising the child on her own. She also has chronic migraines, so she needs to take very strong medication for that, and the pain can be debilitating. On the other hand, the man that we are following is a recovering alcoholic. He is very successful within the more literary fiction, men's fiction side of things, but he is actually looking to move away from writing a little bit and focusing more on mentoring young Black boys in poor communities. Now, these two met when they were younger, and both of them were rather troubled, and they spent 7 days together and had a really strong connection during those 7 days. But those 7 days were pretty messy. Things like drugs were involved, and during that time they had some very deep conversations. However, I believe our character, she almost overdosed on some drugs, and he had not been there when she woke up, and she kind of held that against him. And throughout this book, we kind of watch as the two of them try to find their way back together. Now, the reason that this book is so great is because this book focuses on two people that are healing themselves as individuals and healing themselves as a couple. And I think that that is really important to read. A lot of times we see romances where we're like, oh, we found our soulmate and all our problems are solved and now we don't have to go to therapy anymore. But that's not really how the real world works. So watching these two people who are living very real lives and are both kind of like in a transitional part of their lives and looking to make changes and seeing if those changes align in such a way where they can be together, I think is really important when you're looking to read healthy, realistic relationships, because reading healthy, realistic relationships will help you when it comes to your own relationships. We all know that there are certain romance novels that, yeah, might be fun to read, but they should not be read as an educational manual when it comes to romance. And while this should not be a manual either, I think it definitely is on the healthier side and more realistic side. I think it focuses a lot more on the man being more than just the savior of the woman, but being just like an individual going through his own thing. And so that's why I think men would enjoy this book a lot more, because I think that in a lot of romances, the man is almost like a supporting character. Like, even if the woman is going through stuff and finding herself, he is supporting her and not really doesn't have much going on his own. So I think that this book would definitely allow men to see someone who might be considered very successful on the outside, who is making positive changes in his life so that he can feel successful on the inside, and is working on his mental health and addressing his mental health issues as well as the mental health issues of the young boys around him. And I think that men addressing their mental health is something that needs to be destigmatized, because some men really be acting like going to therapy is the end of the world. Like, you're not less of a man if you go to therapy. You're not less of a man if you acknowledge the fact that you have issues with alcoholism or anything else. In fact, I think that makes you very strong, and he is presented as a very strong man, and also he's with a strong woman. And that goes to show you that even if you're struggling with certain things, you can still stand by the side of a strong woman as long as you're improving yourself and respecting her. That strong woman will want you. So I think this is a great book for men to check out. I'm really hoping some of you decide to go ahead and pick it up. All right, so we have two more. The next one I'll be talking about is the fantasy romance, and then we have one more young adult story that I've talked about a couple times on my channel recently, but I just want every opportunity to talk about it. All right, so the fantasy romance I would like to recommend is going to be Phoenix Unbound by Grace Draven. Grace Draven is highly respected within the fantasy romance genre. I will say fantasy romance is different than romantasy. Romantasy is definitely more romance forward, while fantasy romance is more focused on the fantasy elements and plot. And then the romance is a good part of it. However, it is not overpowering. So I know that there are a lot of men out there who don't like romantasy. I personally am not a huge fan of romantasy either, just because I'm the kind of person who is like, yeah, it's really great that you guys are kissing right now, but there's actually a war going on. So, you know, to a degree, I do understand it. Grace Draven does a great job of building really wonderful relationships, but also having a very interesting fantasy plot and world that she builds. So this is the first book in a trilogy of companions. I have not read the other two yet. However, I did give this one 5 stars, so I want to go ahead and recommend it. We are following a woman who has the ability to burn. Essentially, she has 2 abilities. One is that she can be burned and she can burn other things and then kind of come back from the ashes, hence Phoenix. She can also kind of change her appearance. We are living in a kingdom where every town is expected to make a sacrifice of a woman to the royal family every year. And because of her ability, her people send her to burn every year because she won't actually die like all of the other women who get sent to burn. And this is obviously a very unpleasant task. I believe this is her 5th year of doing so, and she is approached by a gladiator. He was a clansman and he was kidnapped by the royal guard, I guess, after his cousin betrayed him, and he has been one of the top gladiators ever since, but he is looking for a way to escape, and he has been able to see through her disguises and is like, hey, I've noticed you've come here the last 5 years and survived, and so I am going to use your powers to help me escape, and if you don't help me, I will expose you and your entire village will be destroyed for tricking the royal family. So she obviously agrees to this. And after they escape, she's like, okay, I'm gonna go back to my village. Bye, asshole. And he's like, well, actually, my cousin has become the head clansman and I need to get my position back. And because you have these powers, my people would see you as a very powerful and respectable person. And so I need you to return with me as my wife. And she's like, unfortunately, she doesn't really have much of a choice, and so they start their journey to his homeland once again. Now, there's a few reasons I think that men would enjoy this book, despite the fact that our main character is technically a woman, though we do get the man's point of view as well from time to time, and the author is also a woman. But the reason I think they'll enjoy it, because one, it is heavier on the fantasy than the romance. Grace Draven does a wonderful job with what we consider the slow burn romance. This would also be considered an enemies to lovers, but this is not like the annoying enemies to lovers where she's like, I hate this guy, he sucks and he bullies me, but he's just so hot without his shirt on. That's not the kind of enemies to lovers that we're dealing with. I mean, he straight up kind of kidnapped her. So she doesn't like him for legitimate reasons. I really think that Grace Draven does a great job with developing a relationship very naturally, which I think men would enjoy more because some romances feel very forced, and that just makes it seem like the author is desperate to get a romance into the story because women like to see romances, but this is very naturally developed. I also think that Grace Draven does a really great job of world building. Like I said, this is the first book in a trilogy, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the world expand. We got a little bit of an idea of the kingdom and kind of some of the horrible things that this kingdom has done to its people and their war with these clans that are kind of behind this magical protective barrier. And then we get to learn about the clans and kind of the struggles that they have been facing, as well as their desire to live in peace and the fact that living in peace might just mean having to go to war first. So there's a lot of interesting things, a lot of politics that are occurring in this book. We have a character that is going to a new culture that she is not familiar with, but at the same time, we can really see her grow as a person because she was definitely seen as kind of a means to an end. She was kind of almost used as a tool by her old village, and here she receives a lot more respect. She gets to learn a little bit more about her powers. There is a lot of respect for women within the clans, but we also see that there are a lot of men in power. So there's a lot of balance and equality within the clans, which is also great to see. So I think that this is a fantasy that men should definitely check out if they are interested in fantasy stories. And there's a part of me that feels like it gives a little bit more of the old-fashioned fantasy vibes. I haven't read many older fantasies, but this definitely gave me more of the classic vibes, which I feel like a lot of men quite enjoy the classic fantasies. So I think this will have some of the vibes that they really enjoy. On top of that, once again, we are following a very strong female protagonist. Reading strong women is very important because it teaches you that women can, in fact, be very strong. We also see our male main character as he grows to love her and kind of starts to realize that maybe he needs to start groveling a little bit and apologizing for his behavior, and just seeing him grow as a person as well. So definitely a book that I think you straight white men could enjoy and should definitely check out. I have also read her Radiance trilogy, which I think that you guys would enjoy as well. That one, especially the first book, is definitely more romance forward, but I think it's got enough plot and politics, especially in books 2 and 3, that you would have a really great time with it. So if there are any men out there who are like, hey, I would kind of like to check out romance, but I'm a little intimidated by the ACOTAR and the Fourth Wing and the Powerless and all these books that don't sound that good, I think Grace Draven is gonna be your go-to girl. And we are on to the final book of this video. Like I said, if you are familiar with my channel, you've probably seen this one around a little bit lately, and that is going to be Pretty by Keith F. Miller Jr. And this book, oh my gosh, I feel like this book was really what inspired this video, outside of, you know, just the discussion essays that I've been seeing, or the video essays and discussion posts, I should say, that I've been seeing around lately. But this is a young adult book, and I would say that this should be necessary reading for teens. This is a book where we are following two queer young men. I believe one of them is gay and one of them is bisexual. It doesn't like explicitly say, but just based off of the discussions and all that, that was kind of the vibe that I was getting. Now, in this book, these are two young black men who are living in a poor part of town. They seem to be going to a school, or one of them is going to school. The other one got kicked out of school. And it seems to be kind of a mishmash of lower income and higher income families. And there is an organization in this town known as the Black Diamonds, and they are an organization of local black people who are protecting the black community, and they are also seeking to bring unity and peace between the gangs in this area. However, at the beginning of this book, our character's family, who is very high up in the chain of this Black Diamonds organization, is attacked, and it seems like someone is trying to break the peace in this area, and our boys are having to deal with this very scary change of events while they are trying to figure out if they can have a relationship with each other. On top of the relationship between these two boys, we have a ton of great side characters. We have a young boy who our main character Jay used to be friends with, is coming over for the summer, and we are watching them kind of reestablish a relationship after not seeing each other for many years and having left things on a kind of are we more than friends kind of scenario. We have Leroy, whose older brother is actually the leader of the Black Diamonds when it comes to the younger generation, and his aunt, who's a black trans woman, is the leader of the older generation of the Black Diamonds, and he is trying to find a way to make it safe for him and his family so that he can be with Jay, because right now he doesn't want to drag Jay into all of this. And his name is Leroy, by the way. I would say what makes this book so important for men to read is the casual queerness within it, the breaking of stereotypes, and the displays of emotion between these men. I think that nowadays we are regressing when it comes to allowing men to express their emotions, and being able to present themselves in a certain way. And this book does a wonderful job of breaking the stereotypes of tough guys. You know, they got their do-rags, they got their Tims, which I think are those like really big stomp boots, and their baggy shirts and their grills, and they will cry when their brother is hurt. They will express fear when their family is in danger, or even when they are worried that the person they love might not be in love with them as well, or might be unwilling to have a relationship with them because the time just isn't right. They are openly queer, despite the fact that a lot of people would say they're not queer presenting. So I think this does a good job of breaking those queer stereotypes that queer people look a certain way. And once again, just the emotions, the love between men, whether it's loving a romantic partner, loving your brother, loving your friends, just to be open about showing that intimacy, and physical affection, and just telling people that you care about them and that you're here for them. And that's something that I think a lot of men are just taught that they shouldn't do. They should always have like a slight emotional distance, that they shouldn't express those emotions, but they should. It's very healthy, and it makes people happy to know that you care about them, and you should feel comfortable expressing that to those you care about. And this book, people do that very openly, and I think it really normalizes it. So that's why I think it's very important. We're obviously also dealing with homosexuality. We have a lot of queerness within this book, and it's perceived as relatively accepted, especially within the circle that our young boys are moving in. So that's really great to see. It kind of shows how much of a positive impact it has on people to be in a community that loves and accepts them no matter what. It obviously also deals with racism to a degree. It also deals with like colorism, where we have Jay, who is darker skinned, and he has a lot of insecurities about that. He feels like that makes him less attractive. And he kind of learns throughout the story that that is something that he needs to unlearn. But it's not just something he needs to unlearn. It's something that we as a society also need to unlearn, because unfortunately that is something that is still actively happening in all communities around the world. So this book has a ton of great stuff that young men would really benefit from, whether or not they are queer. I think it really breaks a lot of the toxic masculinity stereotypes that are being pushed on men today, and you see a lot of brave men taking action and protecting their families. They are protectors, they are providers, and they are not adhering to those toxic mandates that a lot of people are putting out there for men. Like, you don't need to be out here looking down on women. You don't need to be homophobic. You don't have to repress all of your emotions. You don't always have to jump to violence being the answer to be a real man, okay? You can be very secure in your masculinity and your manhood without falling for those Andrew Tate BS expectations. So really great book. I will continue to push this. If you have a young man in your life, I think that he would very much benefit from this story, and even older men would benefit from this because it is important to unlearn some of the things that you may have learned as a young man so that you don't pass that on to the next generation. All right, guys, so here are all the books that we talked about today. I really hope that if you are a straight white man who has been complaining about the fact that there are no books being published for you out there anymore, that you take the opportunity to kind of jump the aisle a little bit and check out some books that you may think are written for queer or people or just women, and realize that they can be for you as well. There are a lot of great books that you may be missing out on because you only want to read books that you think are just for men. I think you would really expand your horizons if you picked up some of these books and other books that you usually wouldn't. I think it's really important for men and the next generation of men that they are reading about people that don't just center themselves. Because if you are constantly reading books where white men are the center of the universe, then you can't be that surprised when you think men should be the center of the universe, and you're not, and you shouldn't be. We are all equals, and we all should learn about each other's experiences and just increase our empathy and our understanding and our love for each other. So I hope that you guys take this opportunity to grow as a person. I know I am constantly looking to grow as a person through my reading. That is what reading is here for. It's here to teach you about the world and the people around you. It's one of the most beautiful things about reading. So I'm sorry if I was a little bit mean to you at the beginning of this video, but you've been a little mean to us for the majority of human existence. So I feel like you can take it. But I would love to know, like I said in the beginning, any recommendations you guys have for the straight white cis man that you think he would really benefit from, that he would genuinely enjoy, and that would help him grow as a person. As always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!